I read a blog item from Phil recently about how this iPhone, iPad marketplace has made apps cool again, and everyone's happily downloading and installing all kinds of stuff and customizing, and I think that is true for now. I'm personally not sure that it always will be. I think people tend to fall back on inertia, and so for me the question is how do you get these relationships to be embedded in the experiences that people have without them having to go out and take action to change the defaults, right? So in other words, AAA, right? My relationship with AAA should produce a thing, I would like it to be an information card that, then can enable all of the stuff that Kynetx is trying to do, right? I would very much like not to see Kynetx having to be in the business of pushing out these one-off customizations. I mean, I know you have to be there now, but I know that also that it's going to be much better if you can forge these relationships, And I mean, believe me, it's not easy because look, I work for Microsoft. We've shipped 2 versions of Windows right now that have card space in it, right? And I don't know if anyone here has ever used card space, right? So this is an uphill slog, but. With the possible exception of identity geeks, who are heavily overrepresented in this gathering, right? So the other one is, how do I put this? It's about what enables stuff to be contextualized. Right? And so, there are a lot of entities in the world right now that are sitting on a lot of data. And that data is now, thankfully, coming out in forms that are machine readable and processable and linked. And that's a really big deal. And, all of you are going to be engaged in lots of activities that are going to be based off of that, right? And I just want to also invite you to think about the universe of stuff that isn't going to be coming available through those channels, but that we need to get to, right? And it's about a way of thinking about data and the linkages amongst data and about web namespaces. So here's the example. I, in my town, have been talking a lot to the city government about Gov 2.0 kinds of things. And recently, they adopted a couple of different services that I've recommended to them. One is a crime reporting service, and one is a service that puts city council videos up online. And so you might have seen these things. You might have. It's called Granicus. I don't know if anyone has that in their town, but it's pretty cool, right? So they basically take the agenda items and they put those up as a document. And then when the video of the city council meeting is recorded, the agenda items link into the locations of the video, and it's a very nice presentation of the city council meeting. But as cool as it is, it's really not achieving the goal, right? Because the stated goal of all of this is ultimately to engage people, right? To be able to get people to have a conversation which is enabled by this information and this video and these agenda items that are put up online, right? The city really does want people to use this as a framework for talking to one another about the issues that are being discussed by the city. And, a lot of this comes down to such simple stuff that people overlook it. So I looked at this and I realized that the first item that I looked at on the first meeting that they put up was something that I knew something about. And it was about a tax rebate for an alternative biomass heating system, right? And it was about changing the language in the city code to accommodate this, right? Well, I happen to know an enormous amount about that because I fought a war with the city a year and a half ago when I imported a wood gasification boiler from Poland, and then they were like, no, there's no way you can run that thing in your basement. And I was like, yes, it's clean, it's cool, it's exactly, the green future that you say that you want, right? And I went through hell getting these guys to approve the thing. So I knew all about the fact that there was a tax rebate associated with this and all the conditions and terms, right? So, and I've got 4,000 words on my blog about that, right? So what I want to be able to happen is that I want someone who goes to the city website and sees an agenda item that they know nothing about, right? Because you don't know. I mean, unless you really live in the circles where people go to these meetings and spend all of their time, you don't have the context for it. You don't have any ability to evaluate, right? So I was like, I want it to be the case that when somebody sees that, they have the possibility of an overlay that's going to connect to anything on the web that refers to that thing, right? In other words, when I wrote my blog entry, I wanted to just be able to put a tag on it that says, this, by the way, is related to this item that the city was discussing in this meeting, right? And it really just comes down to, Web 101, right? So I said, you know what? You just need to have permalinks and tags on each of your agenda items. And then anything on the web that refers to those things can be brought into a context where someone cares about that. And furthermore, and this was kind of interesting as we talked about it, was that they were concerned about bringing user commentary into their website because there's a question of ownership and control and liability, right? So if they create a comment section on their website and all this stuff then flows in, right, then they have to moderate it, and then they have to potentially be liable for retaining this information if it becomes part of the public record. And they didn't want those hassles, right? They wanted a more loosely coupled or arm's length relationship. So what they actually understood when we talked about this was, so what you're saying is that you're I mean, we didn't use this language, but you're enabling with this naming of items, you're enabling a virtual connection to exist, right? And then, a person can choose or not choose to view the site through a filter that activates those virtual connections. And so you guys are building the filters that are going to activate those connections and make that stuff happen. And I just invite you to think about what's happening on the other end, right? Where are the sources of context coming from? What do people understand about how they can produce that stuff? It's not necessarily all about, who's got the big database in the sky that we can crack open and get access to, right? That in a lot of different ways and in a lot of very simple ways, we can be not only consuming this enhanced context, right? But we can be helping to create it, and I think that's going to be a useful message for you guys to take out with you. So thanks. Oh sure, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, you probably do.
So I have a question. So I was at last year's Impact Conference.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear me. And we talked a lot about silos and the silos of the web. And kind of what you're presenting is a lot of information and a lot of trends regarding implementing some of the same contextual connections inside of these silos. Where does the silo vision kind of coincide with your vision? I'd like to, if you could address that for a second, if you understood that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So let me give you another example because I think that this, I tend to call it web namespace management, and I think it's a really underappreciated idea. So in our case, in the case of my city, right, it's like web namespace is an infinite resource, right, and it costs nothing to mint a URL or a tag. So in the case of Granicus, right, the tags are going to be, pound Granicus, and then there's going to be, a 3-digit identifier, which is the city, and then there's going to be a 4-digit identifier, which is the agenda item, right? So I don't know how many characters that is, but, significantly less than a tweet, right? You can uniquely identify every city council agenda item, for the whole country, right? That's a really powerful thing. Another example of it is when the ARRA, the Recovery Act stuff came out on recovery.gov. I went and looked at that stuff, and I realized that it was kind of the same thing, right? That all of the so if you go there, right, you'll basically find here's a document that says $1 million was released to this school system for a project with this title. And you'll never find anything else about it, right? Because the people who know what's really being done on the ground with that money, the stories that are being told and created every day,